Hello, everyone, and welcome to Your Mind, Your Reality, Your Results, a weekly live show where I speak with an expert on the subject of mindset so you can change your mindset and ultimately get the amazing results that you want in your life. I'm so excited to be welcoming Nicole to the show today. Welcome.
Hi, I am so excited to be here. When I met you, I was like, oh, our brains are just like on the same wavelength. It was so exciting. I could have said, I can talk to you for hours because there's some really neat things we could talk about.
Oh. Well, luckily, everyone gets to be here for a half hour and join us. If we haven't met before, by the way, my name's Leah Fink. I'm the owner and founder of All Thrive, and I help protect people from the pain of damaged relationships. If you're curious about what that is, I would love to talk, so please connect. But you're not just here for me today. I know you're here for Nicole, and we have some really neat stuff to be talking about. So if you have any comments, any questions, please feel free to add those so we can get back to you. Even if you're not watching this live, if you put those in the comment bar, we can make sure to get back to you and answer those questions. You want to take advantage of this. Oh, this is going to be a good one. And so, like I start with everyone, Nicole, I would love to hear a little bit about your journey to hear into the needs languages.
My journey is a little wild. But I'm going to keep it a little more like not so wild because otherwise, everyone has a life and we don't need to be watching a movie right now. I like to add a lot of humor. I'm going to say that you don't know what's going to happen sometimes, but that makes it an adventure, and can be fun, and that's really super important. Life, we have to make fun. We have to have a lot of humor to enjoy life because life is challenging at times. So I did my undergrad in conflict resolution business, and I could have gone into the medical field. I mean, I like to have choices, and I think that's important so you kind of know and discover. And one of the things I would do is I'd go to the business department. I said, oh, you have the most amazing conflict resolution department here. And they'd say, well, that's social work. And I'd look at them and go, don't you have conflict in business? And it's like, and then I went to my master's and I was doing, researching, and I do leadership, and here's the leadership models, here's conflict resolution, and here's communication. And I'm like, okay, so you're researching leadership, but you're not working with communication. You're not working with personality. You're not working here. And then I did research on like personality, and I did research on all these things, and nothing's connected. And I'm like, okay, so that's like telling, and that's the same in medicine. If you look at medicine, Western medicine, Eastern medicine, you'll go to the doctor and they'll say, oh, you have this condition. But then they don't connect meditation. They don't connect these things. And really, so it's like saying your arm's not connected to your shoulder. It's not really. I mean, come on, your elbow's not connected. I mean, our veins are connected to our whole bodies. Come on, let's start saying this. I mean, we're connected. So let's start connecting things. And I started to realize, hey, when Young and Hippocrates started doing their models, now again, Marshall Rosenberg, nonviolent communication, wasn't around at that time, but a lot of this stuff is not connected, and that's where we're missing things. And back in the 1970s, if you're old enough to be a part of that generation, um, or the generation before that kind of time, Louise Hay started to come out with some things about the roots behind illnesses, and we have Heart Math Institute, if you've heard of them, about heart brain coherence. Dr. Joe Dispenza, Greg Brennan, other people. There's all sorts of people who are getting their hands in this pot. Christian, New Age. I mean, all sorts of different places are learning that we are having our heart and our brains when they're connected, we are healing. And so this is so huge about learning connection. And that's how the needs languages were basically born, is realizing, hey, when we know who we are, we become in balance, we create belonging, and voila, that's what happened. And so with COVID happened, it was like, oh, let's really start putting this together and bring something to people, because that's when real connections started falling apart even more.
I mean, as you mentioned before, we've had great conversation. I'm excited for this. And what I particularly like is you pointing out this disconnect maybe between different subsections of how we see leadership to communication. And it can be hard, of course, because you're not going to be an expert on everything, and no one is. And, you know, what we're going to be talking about is really this idea that so much of it is interconnected. When we talk about, you know, the whole person at work, you can't separate just communication and expect to do conflict resolution or leadership well. That it's pretty ridiculous. So I'm really excited to jump into this. So, you know, for people maybe who are joining or seeing all this stuff about needs, language, hearing what you just said, do you want to start by defining what needs are even? Start right at the bottom.
So we all come with our personality. This is what our need are as a human being. And we all have patterns in which the way we process information and process language is kind of, and that's the way it is. So each person has a particular pattern in the way they process language. I have personally a learning disability and a processing disorder. This is kind of how I figured this out. So I process words a certain way. So we figured out that people generally process words a certain way. So for example, there's 4 types of people, and Young and Hippocrates came up with this years and years and years ago. So if you're going to look at like Myers-Briggs or the Enneagrams or any of those kinds of things, these are the forefathers of that information. The difference between mine and theirs basically is that you have to read a little bit more, and they don't add language to it. They basically stop at personality. So I add nonviolent communication more to mine about, hey, you have to be balanced to be able to communicate. So that's the difference.
Totally.
So we're 4 types. We're right, value, important, and control. Now, a lot of people get confused on value. This is not values. We all have morals and values, completely different. So I'm going to describe it. Control is about the environment. Control people like their environment a certain way everywhere they go. That doesn't mean you're a controlling person. It just means you like your environment a certain way. Respect that person the way they like their environment. Value people. They are always basing a decision on cost versus benefit. If they cannot find a cost or a benefit, they cannot make a decision. They are your indecisive people. They really struggle with making a decision. Really, honestly, you're not going to want to be a value person because you're going to be indecisive. But you are. Like, I'm value. That's one of my needs. What do you want to do tonight? I don't know. What do you want to do? No, don't start that again. Okay. I have got to see a benefit or cost to make a decision. A lot of people go, I really want to be a value person. No, you don't. I love myself being value. I'm really empathetic. That's a big, right people. There are your thinkers. It's about right, wrong, good, bad. They're very strong in their belief. When they believe it's right, they lock it in and they go. A right person can really struggle because it is going to be very opinion, very right. That's just they're, this is right. This is the right thing to do. I'm not right. I'm going to tell you, I don't base my decisions on the right thing to do. That's not how I base it on cost or benefit. Important. They're your goal-oriented people. They're about getting the prize. They're very about the self or about other people. That's what they kind of notice. They're about priorities. They're important. So these are our 4 types. We're 2 out of the 4. And what we do is this is how we communicate. This is how we pick our relationships. When we are dating, we pick one that is the same and one that is different. So my TED Talk is on dating and disability and this communication model. I use Love is Blind for people to be able to relate to how they pick your partners, how you communicate. It's a great resource to start learning how people communicate, how you connect with people. And because you need examples, that's how we relate. That's how we understand storytelling. So I'm an important value. Important values have certain patterns, certain things. I'm very goal driven. I need a competition. That doesn't mean I'm competitive necessarily, but I'll give you an example. My partner is eating dinner. I'm in the kitchen chopping vegetables. I'm going, okay, I wonder if I can chop the vegetables quicker than they can eat dinner. They have no idea I'm competing. Eventually I tell them, I beat you. I won the prize. And they're looking at me like, what were you doing? Or did you have another competition in your head? Now, if I were to play sports versus them, they're a control value. They need the environment a certain way everywhere they go. That means for them, they like to discover things. That's what it means by the environment. That has to be something where that's why they like to travel. They liked the adventure. Other people may not like adventure. They like their homebody. That's how they do control. I could care less about the environment. I'm not an environment person. I've got to find the prize. So if we were to play sports, I would be about, okay, how quickly can I get to that base? They're more about, oh, how can I have fun in this environment? Oh, this environment's more fun. Different mindset in the way they do things. We meet in value. So now imagine the two of us trying to make a decision. If we can't find a cost or benefit, nothing gets done. So this is how we communicate our needs. Now, when people say pick your battles, you don't have to, because now you know how each other communicates. So if I'm doing something that is going to mess with my person's environment because I'm on a goal, I'm going to get that prize. Now that prize, as an important person, if that prize is not attainable for me, it's not going to benefit me, I'm not going to do it. I don't care how much you try, I'm not going to do it. If I see I'm going to get that prize and it's detrimental, but I see a benefit in my head, I'm going to go for it. And if it's messing with my person's environment, they've got to know how to communicate with me. They've got to be able to speak my language. This is why we're having conflicts, because we don't know each other's needs.
That is all beautifully put. And I really like the piece about how this relates to conflict, because, I also have a background with nonviolent communication. If people don't know what that is, by the way, you can look up the book, Marshall Rosenberg. There's a ton of resources online. And, he talks about the violence in nonviolent communication is about the barriers we unconsciously or unintentionally put up with ourselves with our language. So what I really love about what you said is you don't have to necessarily compromise. We can take some of those barriers down and be a bit more direct. Now, I am curious, because I know that model. One of the things I like about it is the idea that when you know your needs, there's a lot of different ways that you can meet them, right? If you have a need for belonging, there's millions of ways you can get a romantic partner, you can have friends, you can join a sports team. How does that look, within the model that you're using?
So I know who I'm opposite of.
Okay.
I know who I don't work with. I am an important value. A right control is the opposite of me. I know I'm not going to work with them. I know that they're the strongest personality, and I know that they usually don't like me, and I usually don't like them. And I know that sounds horrible to say, but we don't like certain people. A lot of times we don't know why. I now know why. And with this model, you can know why. Now I also know how to protect myself. I know how to communicate with them. They know how to communicate with me. So I know I can go in and use control language. I know I can go and use right language. That's so powerful, because how many times do we destroy people? How many times do we hurt people with our language? How many times do we not know what to do when someone else is hurting us? How many times do we not know how to protect ourselves? And on top of that, I can get someone else who has one need that's the same as mine and one need that's different. So I now know how to bring a connector in. Now, if you're in the workplace and you're a manager, now you got a connector coming in who can help you. If you can bring this in all sorts of situations. You can bring a connector in, and if you don't have a connector in the situation, you know how to communicate.
No, that's so true. And what I really like about that, I unfortunately have seen a lot of examples of personality typology being used. I wouldn't say wrong, but maybe incomplete. So I use True Colors. I found it's really useful. Talks about not just needs, but values, and goes into that. Also uses 4 colors to represent. And one of the things that, I don't know, I find very interesting is so many people stop at personality types with the self-exploration. And that's super important. You need to know, obviously, your value importance. No. Is that right?
There's value, control, right, and important.
Yeah. So your value important.
I'm important value. Yeah.
Great. Important value.
IV, yeah. Or you can say it anyway. You can say value important. Yeah. You can say it any way you want. Yeah.
Great. So knowing that's great. That's the first thing you need to do. And the piece that you spoke to, which I think is so important and often overlooked, is now that I know I am this thing, how do I choose to change my language, behavior, etc., to work with people who are not my way? Mm-hmm. And there, to me, I agree with you. That is where the power is recognizing that if I approach you from a right control place, for example, and I'm using my language, and I could come in with the best intentions. It's amazing how often this happens with good intentions. It's not going to work. In a lot of cases, it's going to be taken the way differently than you intended it. They're not going to hear it. They're maybe going to think you're attacking them. So just, reaffirm how important that step is, not just knowing, but going that next piece, especially, as a manager, as a parent, whatever role there.
Yeah, and it's so helpful. I mean, people don't understand how. I wish in schools in schools we had things like DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. I wish that was required for the workplace. I wish, for anyone who doesn't know, Marsha Linehan, I get those two confused because their names are so close together, wrote a counseling model for people who were borderline personality. And what she did was, I think it was borderline and bipolar. And what she did is she took a whole bunch of modalities, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and put it together to create a skill-based therapy for how to navigate life. And I can't tell you how powerful that is, emotion regulation. That's one of the modules. And just to teach people how to be more effective in their life. And even when you're dealing with trauma, even when you're dealing with emotional issues, to have the skills to be able to say, I am not okay in this moment. I need to come back to you, is so huge. Skills, even when you're so heightened in emotion, are so huge. I was recently dealing with someone, and it was emotional for me because it was not going right. And they were part of the reason it was not going right. And I wanted to, I'm very expressive. My people sometimes will tell me I'm like a cartoon, which I'm okay with. And that's why I love control people, because I'll just say, I love this model in some aspects. I'm not in control. I'm not a control person. I'm an important value. I'm very driven, and so it can look like control sometimes. Yeah. And I'm not right. And I'm not right. But I love those people because they bring balance in other areas, and we all work together. And I recently did have a conflict with someone, and they were sweet, but they were not control either. And it was creating chaos. And I was like, oh my God, what am I God? I mean, it was pretty like, oh wow. And he really needed them to get it together, and it was affecting me in a very negative way. And so I had to use this model to speak their language and put my emotions aside. And it was really hard, I got to tell you, because it's almost like you feel like you're eating crow. And I hate that expression because, it's not good for, you're not being appropriate with vegans right there in that moment. Because they're like, I'm a vegetarian, I'm a vegan, I don't eat crab. And this was not politically correct there either. So so the thing with it is it gives you the ability to say, okay, I can speak my needs language in this moment, and I can speak the other person's needs languages, and then I can go and give myself some self-comfort, and be aware that this is not feeling comfortable. And that's what I really love about this. And I also believe that we should be using multiple people. This is also a place of, as I said, when I went to the conflict, when I went to the business department, and that was a very innovative department at where I went to school at. They're brilliant, but it's not just one person. It's multiple people. We have to learn to work together. When Leah was talking a second ago, she said, I use true colors. I use nonviolent communication. All these people that have come before us are brilliant people and have given us these tools. And when you say, I'm the leader, I'm the expert, I know everything, I've stolen from these people, we acknowledge these people, we give these people credit, we honor these people big time. I commend you for saying you use these modalities, you honored these people. That is huge. And we combine these modalities because guess what? They work, but they don't work by themselves. They work together. And I also talk about Gretchen Rubin. She came out of positive psychology. She has some amazing things about, the upholder, the obliger, the rebel, and the questioner. And I talk a little bit about that, but they all work together.
Well, the piece to tie kind of a couple of your last points together, talking about that skill development, is these people who have come before us, who've given us these beautiful skills. And as we have more people coming with different ideas, we can, integrate those different pieces of skills, and especially giving people maybe a bit the grace, let's say, to acknowledge that their skills might not be perfect. Because this is the interesting part about all these soft skills, right? Your communication, your conflict resolution, your emotional regulation, like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. We all have them. We all have the skill that we're not bursting out crying at every moment of the day or screaming at someone, and that we can have a relationship with our family member and we can understand and talk to people. But the fine tuning of those skills, I think it can be really hard for people to say, ooh, maybe my conflict resolution skills aren't quite what I hoped they were. Oh, maybe my emotional regulation isn't what I thought, because I just started screaming at someone I didn't mean to. And, the grace to say, yeah, that happened. The ability then to reach out and get these skills. And I'm very passionate about skill development as well, and proactive skill development. Like, I truly believe no matter how good you are, there's always the next level. And this growth, like you said, of past brilliance with future brilliance is such a big part of that.
Yeah. It's having a blockbuster mindset or a Netflix mindset. I love that analogy. Someone asked me one time, what is that analogy? Blockbuster was so innovative when they came out with the videotape. I mean, and if you're a millennial, you probably don't really know what a videotape is. So you got to go YouTube it. And that'll show you like way back then. And you had the cassette tape, and then you had the 8-track, I mean, this is really dating us. But then I always say, if you don't date yourself first, who's going to date you? You kind of got to date yourself first. But if it wasn't for that innovation, we wouldn't be where we're at now, where we can live stream things and not have to have our house filled I mean, you had to have your house filled with like all these like bulky things. But the problem with Blockbuster is they didn't see what was coming next. And they stayed in that mindset, and they stayed single. And the problem was they didn't move, and Netflix started moving, and they started to see where they could move. And that's what's going on. There are so many things out there that need to be collaborated. It is not about one single person anymore. It's not about the single leadership. It's about us working together and leading together. And that's where we're moving towards. And I recently saw an article by a very famous or very strong leader and a very millionaire. I mean, he's a billionaire. He's one of the top car manufacturing people. And he wrote an article telling his employees, you're going to be in the office 40 hours a week. We're not doing this hybrid stuff. And I was like, you are not listening to your employees. I don't care how rich you are right now. That's a blockbuster mindset. And if you're going to bulldoze your way through people, guess what? You may not last. And your life is only so long on this planet. People are changing. We're having retention issues in the workplace. And now I've written other books because you have to have your life situated, like dating and your romantic relationships and your parenting. I have books on that, on how to have that balance. That's important, because if you're not balanced in that, it's going to affect your work life. And I was looking at that article and going, dude, you think you're God. And when you have that God complex, pride comes before a fall. And the reason it does is because you have to see what's behind that pride. And we've got to care about each other. And it's not going to be this, you care about people so you can get sales. That's not what it's about. People can see through that BS. It's caring about people because you genuinely care. It's working with each other because we care about each other and we want the best. Your success, Leah, makes my success. My success makes your success. Whether we do the same thing or not, because you are going to be able to communicate to those control people that I may not. And I may communicate to those value people that you may not. Or whoever, because that's why we're made uniquely and differently, because that's what it's about. I learned that as a singer. I sing symphonic metal. And there's beautiful singers out there that sing the same genre as I do. But I don't like all the same singers in that genre. And there's a reason why. They don't sound good to my ear. And someone else may like that singer that I don't like. That's why. That's why we're uniquely made. You may be a middle piece and I may be a corner piece. And you may be a corner piece of the puzzle and I may be a middle piece. That's why we're uniquely shaped differently to be different pieces in the puzzle.
And that ties, first of all, really nicely with the idea of what can happen in offices is either false harmony, of you get the leader who is a certain personality type and everyone else just has to deal with it, like your CEO. My thinking brain is also, there's a fantastic article about how CEOs actually have a little less empathy because they have less of these human connections, less opportunities for healthy conflict. So you can get this false harmony, but also what can happen with teams, which is, I would say, equally unhealthy, is you get leaders that pick themselves. And so I could make myself an office full of Leahs and we'd all be similar and communication would be so easy. Mm-hmm. And I would miss out on this whole spectrum of other behaviors and strengths and skills and the opportunity for people to question and say, because, that CEO of that car company might have 5 yes men around him who all think the same and are going, yeah, that's a great idea, boss. And then the rest of his company, which is all the different types, all these different ideas, are going, what are you even talking about?
There's a wine guy that talks about that. He hires people who are the opposite of him, and he's become very, very successful. He's a potty mouth, I will say that, but he's out of New Jersey, and I've watched him. And I wanted to say one other thing. I really commend you, because when we talked, you could have looked at me and gone, you're just going to be competition for me. There's no way I'll have her. And instead you said, we are in the same field, but I'm open to having you, Nicole. I'm open to having a conversation. And I have a lot of respect for that. I have a lot of respect for you for that. And I remembered that. And I remembered when we scheduled this and I was like, thank you. And that shows a lot of integrity. And I want to say that live for everybody to hear, because it's about building trust and integrity.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And I mean, it speaks to something you said a little while ago too, which is, I'm going to say something and you're going to say it differently. Yeah. And someone's going to hear me and understand that and go, yes, Leah. And someone's going to hear you and understand you and go, yes, Nicole. And I don't want to limit the people who speak differently than me or who hear differently than me. Because as much as I can adapt how I speak and adapt how I work with everyone, ultimately I'm still Leah, you're still Nicole. And I love being able to bring that varied perspective. I'm also aware time has absolutely flown. Where has it gone? But if people did have more questions about the needs language, how this works out, how can they reach you?
They can come to my website, The 7 Candles. I would really encourage you to watch the TEDx talk. You can look up Nicole Shir TEDx. You'll find it. Please watch it. Please pass it along. I'm really super excited about this. And you can always find me on YouTube. I have the Seven Candles YouTube channel, Facebook, the Seven Candles, and please contact me. I would love to. You find my books on Amazon and reach out.
Awesome. And we're going to make sure that we put Nicole's link tree in the description as well. So you'll be able to take a look at that. And that has all of the different links. So I recommend the TED Talk. I recommend, Nicole's been super generous with her knowledge sharing. So do reach out, and just thank you so much for being on the show today.
And Leah, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. You are fabulous and amazing, and big social distance hugs and a big heart.
Oh, well, I'm sending them right back, sending them out to the audience as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. And remember, every